Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Staci.
And I'm your co-host, Sarah.
And today, in this episode that's closest to Mother's Day without going over, like we're doing Price is Right for Mother's Day.
Is it Price is Right?
$1, one mother. We will be talking about two films about mothers, Tully and Kidnap. So
they're not exactly feel-good Mother's Day movies.
No.
But they are about mothers.
They are. The mothers, and isn't that's all that's required for Mother's Day is a mother?
Yeah, just a mother.
Any mother somewhere. So the first film, Tully, stars Charlize Theron, and it's about this woman, Marlo, who already has two kids and is pregnant with her third and is having a bit of a hard time and gets convinced by her brother to hire a night nanny to help her out. And a night nanny is almost exactly what it sounds, a nanny who just comes at night and takes care of the baby so the parents can get some sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which, is a good thing, I guess, unless you're, so she's not nursing, I would think. Otherwise,
right, no.
You can't have a night nanny, or it just brings you the baby.
No, she does, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So her brother convinces her of this, not her husband?
Right. So her brother and his wife have a regular nanny, like an everyday nanny.
Okay.
But evidently they also had a night nanny when they had their last child, and they're more sort of, I'm going to go with bougie. That's not what I mean, but that's kind of how she and her husband view them, even as sort of, bougie. And like the nanny they hire, they go over there for a dinner, and the nanny takes the kids off in a separate room. So the kids have a kid-friendly dinner while they have like special sushi or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Marlo's son, her second child, I believe must be somewhere on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
But they haven't been able to figure it out. He's been to several doctors and they're not quite sure. And so they just keep using the word quirky. He's quirky in this film. He only evidently eats chicken nuggets. And the nanny, who has like multicolored dreads, is like, goes off on about how terrible factory farming and chicken nuts are with these kids. And it's just like, oh yeah, okay. I get this completely would like date the film like 20, 40 years from now. I'll immediately be able to tell like what decade this film was in by that nanny.
Right. Now, okay, is this like a single white female kind of movie, or is the nanny going to go crazy and try to take over, or what?
See, that was what I thought at first. So the nanny totally does come by. Charlize Theron has a really bad day with her son, who's too quirky, evidently, for his school. His school that he evidently supposedly only got into because her brother is a donor there.
Dang, her brother's just everywhere.
Right? So, and he's the one who actually offers to pay for the night nanny as a sort of new baby gift or something.
Okay.
But she has a really bad day, and she just sort of cracks and finally decides to hire this night nanny, who comes by and is immediately sort of to the point that as the movie went on, I kind of did half expect it to turn into like an obsession horror film where she either wants to like get in a relationship with Charlize Theron or become her and get rid of her. I was just like, what is going on? And you're way too calm about this strange woman in your house with your baby.
Okay, so it's not an obsession / horror film, but it's it sounds like there is some weirdness going on. So what's the point exactly then?
So it takes possibly nearly till the end before you really do sort of start to get the point. And it is, I think, sort of a commentary on motherhood. And not saying that she's married, but her husband has a business that kind of requires him to go away at times. So a lot of the times it's her by herself.
Right.
And then when he is home, half the time he's like, when they're getting ready for bed, he'll be in the bed with headphones on playing some sort of video game. So he's there and he's trying to be supportive, but he's not as supportive as she probably needs.
He sounds a little checked out sometimes.
Right.
Okay.
But he means well. He definitely, he's not a terrible guy. He's just not quite, they don't quite know what they're doing with each other. But yeah, there's definitely sort of a message and a metaphor in this movie that I can't say too much about.
Okay.
It's a little strange. And again, I would immediately, after like the first night, not have had this woman come back because she immediately throws me off. And even Charlize Theron in the first night, when she goes upstairs, tells her husband she's kind of weird. And he's like, "Are you okay with that?" or something. And she's like, "Yeah." And then he goes back to playing his video game.
Okay, now
this continues.
I realize this is the movie and not real life, and so I might be being a little too like literal about things, but did they do a background check on this woman?
Well, she came highly recommended through a night nanny service.
Okay.
So when her brother offers to pay for a night nanny, he gives her a card. So she has to call the night nanny service to get a night nanny. It's not just a random person he happens to know. It's from a nanny service.
Okay, so in theory, she's been vetted, etc.
Right.
All right.
But she comes in at times and is talking about like the first thing she comes in and she gets introduced to the baby and asks what the name is, and they said Mia, and we were gonna name our oldest daughter Mia, but we didn't because it was too popular at the time. And she's like, "So what?" She's very much of the like, I don't care about ridiculous societal rules that don't make sense sort of thing. And like the first night she tells Charlize Theron's character to kiss the baby goodnight because she'll be different in the morning. And it's just like, you're you're not like, there's nothing that's immediately like, I feel dangerous with you, but you're a little off-putting that I'm not super comfortable with
so
you.
she's just a little strange.
And then when they wake up in the morning to find out that she's cleaned the whole house.
Oh.
And I'm just like, on the one hand, thanks. But on the other hand, I'm a little worried that you're like super comfortable just going around my house and everything. Like, what?
Well, I mean, that's nice. It kind of depends on what her expectations. See, again, I'm being like real world literal here. What are what are the expectations of this night nanny? Is she supposed to stay awake all night and clean your house? Or, you know?
No, she's just supposed to stay awake and care for the baby and then bring the baby to you when the baby needs to nurse and change the baby's diaper, so you don't wake up and have to get up and do all this.
Right.
Because, and I don't have kids, but people who have kids probably would know a newborn does not sleep through the night at all.
Not usually, no.
So there is a montage of before Charlize Theron finally cracks to bring in this night nanny of her constantly having to get up, change the diaper, breastfeed the baby, this like non-ending, tiring, just motherhood care sort of thing.
So the actress that plays Tully is Mackenzie Davis. I'm not familiar with her really. She's been in some things I've seen, but I don't really.
Right, like I spent it watching. I know I've seen you, but I couldn't name it to save my soul.
Yeah,
but yeah. So there's a strange thing that happens later with Tully, and it's a little strange how quickly Charlize Theron gets with Tully, and everyone remarks on that fact. That once Tully comes into their lives, she sort of seems to start to glow and seem more alive than she had been before.
Which sounds, again, like a science fiction horror film. Like she's sucking the life out of somebody.
But she and Tully talk a lot, and to the point where it's like, why do you even have this night nanny since you tend to be up with her while she's nannying? So what's the point of hiring her if you're not going to go to bed? But it's sort of finally giving her someone I guess she feels she can talk to, who understands her and who actually listens to her. And I guess she feels she doesn't have that anywhere else in her life. And there's some sort of metaphor things going on in this film. There's a thing at the very beginning, before the movie even starts, where Charlize Theron goes into her son's bedroom and brushes him with this strange brush. It's not like a hairbrush. It's a, I don't quite know how to explain it, brush.
Like a curry comb, like a dog brush. What are we talking about here?
I mean, she later tells Tully she brushes him a bit like a horse, but the bristles are all plastic. But this was recommended by one of his doctors to sort of help desensitize him or something. And then we get that comes up again at the end. And so that's clearly, it seems, supposed to be a bit of a metaphor for like Tully herself. Mm-hmm. But since Tully herself is a bit of a metaphor, it's like,
there might be a few too many metaphors going on there.
Yeah. Well, and then there's this whole other thing about mermaids in the film that I don't quite get. Charlize Theron keeps kind of having a dream about mermaids. And then when she goes to give birth to her third child, there's a thing about mermaids on the TV. And then something's going on with her first daughter, and there's a thing with mermaids on the TV. And even in the poster, she's got a sticker of a mermaid. So there's clearly something about mermaids, and mermaids are, I guess, representing something, but that one is really not clear to me. I could not come up with a specific thing for that by the end of the film. I was just like, but I might have just been completely thrown off by the ending, which is sort of like, whoa, wait, what? What?
Now, back to talking about, you know, what genre this movie is. Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm not sure what they were going for in the trailers, but the trailers, I mean, it clearly shows a woman who's struggling with 3 kids and parenting and everything. Right. But it's a little hard to tell even from the trailer what the genre is, yeah. And it didn't really look like something that I necessarily. I mean, it didn't seem like there was much humor. It didn't seem like it just. And there doesn't have to be in a movie. Obviously, this is right. You know, a sketch of parenthood and other things, and then, you know, metaphors that you didn't understand or were explained. But I don't know. The trailer just didn't do anything for me.
It didn't do anything for me either. It seemed like one of those sort of indie festival films that I never really understand from the trailer. Yeah. And by the end of it, I feel like I understand it a bit more. And maybe it's, again, because I don't have kids, that I feel like mothers who actually have kids, especially young kids, would get this much more than I would by the end of this film. But yeah, the trailer, it's that same sort of thing. And it's written by Diablo Cody, who I believe wrote Juno.
Yes.
And Juno was a bit clearer to be a bit of a comedy, but It's that same sort of, this is life and this is how we deal with it sort of thing going on that you saw in Juno as well. Like, it's not perfect, but this is where we are.
Right.
Kind of thing. Right. So it's that with motherhood.
Sure.
And I don't know. I'm going to assume that, like, Charlize Theron used a prosthesis for the baby when she was pregnant in this film. I don't think she was actually pregnant filming it.
Right.
But that comes up quite a bit. We don't fully shy away from the body things, and that's in one of the trailers. Is
right. Even in the trailer, she
takes off her shirt, and the girl's like, "Mom, what's wrong with your body?"
Right.
Thanks, daughter. That was very kind.
Yeah.
But you do see breastfeeding and pumping out breast milk, and at one point there's a thing, and I didn't get this, so I had no idea what was going on. I thought she was having a heart attack when she goes out with Tully one night. And she keeps sort of like clutching her chest in pain.
No.
And I thought I was like, are you having a stroke or something? And why are we much calmer about that? And it's that she evidently needed to breastfeed.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. And I was like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it has an R rating, but I think that's more due to the language because there are some F-bombs, and Charlize Theron, on the day when she just loses it and finally caves and calls the night nanny, throws a bit of those at her son's school's principal, because that's when she's being told, you know, maybe this is not the right fit for your son. Maybe he should go elsewhere. And she's just like had enough, and it's struggling.
I mean, so it seems like it is a pretty stark, realistic picture of what motherhood can be, and, you know, the struggles that she is a new mom, but she's also a mom of older kids, and how, you know, there's a scene in the trailer where she walks away and the breast milk tips over. And I have many, many friends who I can just hear in my head gasping because that stuff, you do not want to waste the breast milk. So, I mean, it sounds like they give a very realistic portrait. I just wasn't. And again, I haven't seen it. So do you feel like in the end it wrapped things up in a way that made a point? I know you can't say what happened at the end.
Right. I think it's definitely making a point. The way they wrap things up with Tully, I'm not sure how many mothers would relate to that. But I think they all probably could relate to the desperation she feels enough to call Tully. But then the way Tully's story sort of ends, it's just like, yeah, would I have done that whole thing? I don't know. But it is definitely making a point about motherhood and how stressful motherhood can be, both, you know, mentally and emotionally, but also just like physically on this woman. Like there's a point, I think it might be in one of the trailers, where she's telling Tully, you know, your 20s are great, but then your 30s come around the corner like a train, and your body will not always look as great as it does right now.
Right.
And especially through motherhood, that generally tends to be the case. So she sort of feels, I think, that her life's gotten away from her, and this was not at all what she, you know, planned for in her 20s, and isn't quite sure how she got here and how do I really deal with this. But it does feel sort of, we're gonna be okay at the end, even if it's not clear how exactly we're gonna be okay.
Okay, so let me ask you one last question before we go to break. Would you take your mother to see this for Mother's Day?
I don't know that I take her to see it. I think it's a good film to see for Mother's Day, and I think it's actually more so a better film for children of mothers who are old enough to appreciate it, but maybe don't have kids themselves, so don't have the experience to appreciate what your mom went through, to have that sort of insight of, oh yeah, that must have actually been really tough for her, and I don't myself know. I think it's better for that. So I might actually like more take my friends or my sister than take my mother.
Okay.
So yeah. So we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. You're listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast. Our second movie today about mothers is Kidnap, the Halle Berry film where her son is kidnapped. It's almost self-descriptive just by the title. But she is bound and determined to get him back and does not want to sit around and wait for the police to try and do it. She will do it herself.
So when we first started talking about doing this movie this week, I said, so basically it's like the female version of Taken?
It's not.
Okay.
But that was my fear going in. I was like, oh, please don't be the female version of Taken. And what is with like all these actors deciding, you know what, after I've done all my serious dramatic films for several years, let me go off and do action films. Right. So that makes perfect sense. I'm like, whatever. So
right.
No,
well,
thankfully.
Maybe she got that out of her system by being Storm.
But she didn't really get to do much as Storm.
Well, but I mean, she still got to be in an action film and wear Lycra.
Yes, that's what we all want to do in action films. It's about the wearing Lycra.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in this, she's not like in Taken, some sort of super spy or assassin or anything. She is a single mother who works as a waitress, and is getting divorced, I think, or divorced from her ex-husband, who now has a new girlfriend, fiance, wife, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's a possible sort of custody battle coming between them.
Oh, dear. Okay.
But she takes the day and takes her son to a park. And it's a little weird because there seems to be like Ferris wheels and roller coasters, but then there's also like a regular jungle gym. So it's like, is it a theme park or a regular park or something? She and him go and sit and watch I don't know if it's a music show or a magic show or something, But then she has to take the call regarding her ex-husband who's going to file for custody over the kid. And so she leaves him, but she and him constantly do this thing where they play Marco Polo. So she can sort of keep a track of him. So while she's on the phone, she'll every now and again yell Marco and he'll answer back Polo. But
until he doesn't.
Right. So she gets off the phone and she's upset and she wants to go back to him. And he has this recording device that he's been playing with. So when she goes back, he's not there, but only his recording device is. And she can't find him and goes looking through the park and sees him get dragged into a car and decides to chase them down. And then the whole movie sort of goes from there.
Okay. Now, I know you can't give away too much, and so if you can't answer this question, I understand. But is this kidnapping anything to do with the custody battle?
No.
Okay.
No, it's not.
So it's just completely non-related.
Right. Yeah. So we never see his father or hear from his father. That was the lawyer on the phone or something.
Okay.
But so she immediately tries to chase them down. And I think 3/4 of this film is car chases.
Nice.
And it's her in her van chasing down these people.
That's even better.
Yeah, she's in a van chasing down these people in I think it's a GT something. I don't know cars. She at one point takes his recording device and records it to herself so she won't forget it's an 80s green GT something.
Okay.
I really don't know cars at all. And there's several things where, and the kidnappers in this film are a little crazy because she's chasing them down and they're aware of it. So at one point they open up the back and start tossing things out the back to try and stop her, which creates a big car crash behind her because she manages to avoid it, but the people behind her don't.
Right. Oh,
and then they at one point hold a knife to the kid's throat. At one point they sort of dangle the kid out the door like they're going to drop him. They cause several car accidents through this whole thing and do not seem to care about any collateral damage whatsoever. And I'm just like, you guys are nuts. What the heck is the matter with you people? What is this worth to you, this kid, that you're so desperate and won't give him back? Because she, at one point, they actually do have a standoff where she sees them, and neither of them are moving at the moment. And she's like, look, I will give you everything I have. Just give me my kid back. And they still just really want the kid. And it's explained at the end why that is. But
okay, I was going to ask. You don't have to tell me why. I just want to know, do they explain it?
Yes. But during the whole thing, I was just like, oh my God, what the heck? And this film, save for the beginning where the kid gets kidnapped, this film actually is really, really convenient for Halle Berry's character.
Okay.
Ridiculously convenient. She manages to find them. Once she manages, first and foremost, to even see the son get kidnapped, which, given the amount of time she spends looking for him around the park, seems kind of unbelievable.
Right. Where did they take a walk first?
Because it's explained that he gets kidnapped because the woman convinces him that his mother's in the parking lot looking for him.
Oh, okay.
So he goes off to the parking lot. And it's like, okay, but he went straight to the parking lot and she wanders around the whole rest of the park yelling for this kid. Mm-hmm. And yet still somehow just manages to see him get dragged into the car? Really?
Right.
Okay. But then later she manages to find them again once she's had to get off the highway and comes back. They at one point crash their car and go wandering off to a town, which is where she finally goes to the police station, but then refuses to wait at the police station because she's so desperate to get her kid back and decides to sort of drive slowly through the town looking for them. And manages to see them right as they get into a new car of all the things. She goes off once when the car crash because she sees sort of smoke coming up and just assumes that must be them and goes off that way, even though that's not the highway she's on at the beginning. I'm just like, you got really lucky way too many times for this. That's unbelievable. You should have lost this kid 3 or 4 times over. So it was really hard watching this, and I was watching it with my mother, and I kept sort of calling things out, oh, that can't be them, or oh, that can't really be a police, and then it really is a police. I was like, you know what, I give up. I clearly cannot call anything in this film.
Did your mother tell you to hush?
No. But it's clearly every time I call something, that's completely wrong. So whatever, I would lose every bet on this film. It's just what the heck.
So this has nothing to do with what you were just talking about, but I was just reading some of the trivia on IMDb, and it says this was originally supposed to be released in October of 2015, but the studio went bankrupt. It was pushed back 5 times, so it wasn't released for almost 2 years, August of 2017.
I can kind of get that. It's not that great a film.
It's interesting that they even released it.
Well, I mean, they have to at some point. It's not at least like as bad as the Red Dawn remake, which I think took like 5 years. And so was made before Chris Hemsworth was really famous for Thor and then came out like, several years after. It's like, okay. But yeah, no, this is not the best of films. The lines, like all the lines that Halle Berry says in the trailer that sort of like made me think at first it was going to be like Taken 2, like you took the wrong kid or whatever, in the film just comes off sort of like ridiculous, especially given that for most of the car chases, she's just sort of like screaming, oh my God, and or like talking to herself to try and get herself through it.
Sure.
So it's like, that's really believable, but then that throws me off with the whole she's supposed to be super awesome at whatever things. And again, a huge part of it seems to be luck with her and the way she manages to get things done. But she is absolutely determined, even knowing, and she's able to see even better than the kidnappers, the car crashes that happen behind them, and is still like, you know what, I'm still going to go and get my kid. She at one point runs out of gas and decides, you know what, have to get off the car and run for that. Like, oh wow. She is so determined to get her kid back. It's almost insane. It's almost a little like I get that you have this strong feeling to get your kid back, but I'm not sure that strong feeling would equal to you being able to do everything you do.
Right. I mean, that powerful mother, and I'm sure all of us would want to do everything we could to get our child back. Right. I just don't know. I don't know. Would that make me a bad mother if I didn't chase the car down? I just don't know that I trust my driving that much to try to do a high-speed chase.
Well, I'm more concerned at, these people who are clearly, I don't care enough about other people's lives to create these car accidents. Your kid's in the car with those people. Mm-hmm. Like, and I get why she feels desperate because the car doesn't have license plates on it. So if she loses sight of it, there's no way to really track it down. Okay. It doesn't have the back license plate. It's got a sort of hood cover on the front. So if it does have a front license plate, you can't see it. So if all you've got to give the police is 80s green whatever, that's not going to help a lot. Mm-hmm. And so she definitely doesn't want to lose it because then there's like really no way to track it. Otherwise, right. She doesn't. Right. She doesn't even see the kidnappers' faces until the standoff with the money. She only, like when they put the knife to the kid's throat, you only see the arm of one of the kidnappers with the knife. You don't actually see the kidnapper's face for like half the film. So she has to, if she doesn't want to lose track of them, because she doesn't have any other way to follow them. Okay. So I get that. And I get, sort of that whole mama bear protecting her cubs sort of thing. But then, like, later in the film, the way she deals with each of the kidnappers is sort of like, would you really have been able to do that and have thought to do that in that moment? Right. Like, in the moment of this really tense thing that's been going on for a few hours now, you would have been that quick thinking, really? Yeah. I guess my other question is, what would I do if I caught them? I mean, right. Okay, they obviously have a knife, but I would assume that they're, I don't know, maybe I would just assume they're armed. And then yes. What do I do? How do I get my kid without him being killed? Or, right. I mean, okay, I'm not going to have children because they'll be, first of all, they're going to grow up in a world where they're going to get killed by AI anyway. I had to throw that in there. Of just course. For you, I threw that in there. Uh-huh. And then if they get kidnapped, I can't do anything. So. You could have the AI track them. Perfect. Okay. Just sort of, put the little tracker in their arms like pets. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's not at all, invasion of privacy weird. Or anything. Okay. Back on topic. Yeah. So it is, for the most part, sort of action-y, car chases, whatever things. But then near the end, it sort of turns almost tense-ish. Mm-hmm. Because at some point, she does have to start sneaking around. And that's the point where I would have been like, yeah, since we kind of know where we're going at this point, shouldn't you have gone back and called the cops? Why are we going to sneak by ourselves with these people we clearly have seen are crazy and willing to kill for this? Like,
right.
Really, you absolutely want get your kid back, but is that the best way to do it? I don't know. And the way that she manages to, one of them is believable, the way she deals with them, and then the other one, I'm just like, this is not believable unless you're like the Taken with the special set of skills.
Right.
Like, I'm not quite sure I buy this with you.
So you saw this with your mom, so I don't have to ask you that question. Did you ask your mom if she'd be willing to do that if you got kidnapped?
I did not. Oh man, I kind of assumed she would, just from the way, I assumed my mother would. Maybe not to the let's cause 3 car accidents sort of thing. But everything else, the willing to at least start a car chase thing and hit someone in the head with a shovel, which is in the trailer, I totally believe my mother would be willing to do that. So
go, Mom.
Yeah. And on that wonderful note, we're going to end for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.